Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to dive deeper into Vue.js and its features. Are you ready to get started, Jerry?
Absolutely, Joanna. Let's get into it.
Great. Let us start with declarative rendering. One of the most distinctive features of Vue.js is its use of a declarative approach to rendering views. With Vue.js, you can simply define what you want to display and let the framework take care of the rest. This makes it much easier to create dynamic and responsive UIs, without having to worry about the underlying implementation details.
That sounds really convenient. So, can you give me an example of how this works in practice?
Sure. Let us say you have a simple app that displays a list of items. In Vue.js, you can define the HTML markup for the list, and then use a loop to iterate over the items in your data model and generate the corresponding list items. Vue.js will then take care of updating the DOM whenever the data changes. This means that you don't have to manually manipulate the DOM to add or remove items from the list.
That's really cool. So, what's next?
Next up is component-based architecture. Vue.js is built around the concept of reusable components. This means that you can break down your UI into smaller, more manageable pieces, and then reuse those pieces throughout your app. This makes it much easier to create complex UIs, as you can focus on building and testing individual components, rather than having to deal with the complexity of the entire app at once.
That sounds like a really efficient way to build apps. How does Vue.js handle communication between components?
Vue.js provides a number of mechanisms for communication between components. One of the most commonly used is props, which allow you to pass data down from a parent component to a child component. You can also use events to communicate from child components back up to the parent component, or between sibling components. In addition, Vue.js provides a centralized event bus that can be used to communicate between any components in your app.
Interesting. What about two-way data binding?
Vue.js provides two-way data binding between the view and the data model. This means that changes made to the view are automatically reflected in the data model, and vice versa. This makes it much easier to keep the view and the data in sync, and can help reduce the amount of boilerplate code that you need to write.
That's really handy. So, how does Vue.js handle the DOM?
Yes, that's right. The reactivity system in Vue.js makes it easy to keep your data and UI in sync. You can define data properties in the Vue instance, and then bind them to your template using a simple syntax. Whenever the data changes, Vue.js automatically updates the template to reflect the new values. This makes it much easier to create dynamic and responsive user interfaces.
That sounds really cool. I've worked with other frameworks before, but this sounds like it takes a lot of the complexity out of building UIs.
Yes, it definitely does. And one of the other great features of Vue.js is its component-based architecture. You can break your UI down into smaller, reusable components, which makes it easier to manage and maintain your code. Components can be composed of other components, so you can build up complex UIs from simple building blocks. And because components are isolated from each other, you can make changes to one component without affecting the rest of your UI.
That makes sense. It sounds like Vue.js is really designed with scalability in mind.
Definitely. And another thing that makes Vue.js great is its simple and intuitive template syntax. You can use a template to define your UI, and then bind data properties to that template using simple directives. The template syntax is very flexible, so you can easily create dynamic and interactive UIs without having to write a lot of complex code.
That sounds really powerful. And what about computed properties? You mentioned them earlier.
Yes, computed properties are a really useful feature of Vue.js. They are basically functions that are called whenever their dependent properties change. So if you have a computed property that depends on a data property, and that data property changes, Vue.js will automatically update the computed property. This makes it really easy to perform complex calculations and manipulate data in real time.
Wow, that's really cool. It sounds like Vue.js is a very powerful framework.
It definitely is. And one of the other great things about Vue.js is that it has a built-in routing system, which makes it easy to create single-page applications with multiple views. You can define routes in your application, and then use them to navigate between different views. This makes it really easy to create complex, Interactive applications with a lot of different pages and views.
That sounds really useful. It's amazing how many features Vue.js has built in. I'm definitely going to have to give it a try.
I highly recommend it. Vue.js is a really powerful and flexible framework that makes it easy to build dynamic and interactive user interfaces. Whether you're rebuilding a simple web app or a complex enterprise application, Vue.js has everything you need to get the job done. That is a great question, Jerry. In Vue.js, components are reusable pieces of UI that can be used throughout your application. They allow you to break down your UI into smaller, more manageable pieces, which can make it easier to build and maintain complex applications.
That sounds really useful. Can you give me an example of how components can be used in Vue.js?
Sure thing, Jerry. Let's say you're rebuilding a web application that has a list of items that need to be displayed. Instead of writing all the code to display each item individually, you could create a component for each item and then reuse that component throughout your application. This would make your code more modular and easier to maintain.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. What about two-way data binding in Vue.js? How does that work?
Two-way data binding is another powerful feature of Vue.js. It allows you to bind data between the view and the data model in both directions. This means that changes made to the view are automatically reflected in the data model, and changes made to the data model are automatically reflected in the view.
That's pretty cool. How does Vue.js accomplish that?
Vue.js uses a special syntax called vmodel to enable two-way data binding. You simply need to add the vmodel directive to your HTML input element and bind it to a property in your data model. When the input value changes, the data model is automatically updated, and vice versa.
That sounds like it could save a lot of time and effort. What about directives? How do they work in Vue.js?
Directives are another important feature of Vue.js. They allow you to manipulate the DOM, bind data to the DOM, and create custom behaviors. Vue.js comes with a set of built-in directives that you can use in your application, such as vif, v-for, and vbind.
What's an example of how you would use a directive in Vue.js?
Sure thing, Jerry. Let's say you have a button on your web page that you want to disable when a certain condition is met. You could use the vbind directive to bind the disabled attribute of the button to a property in your data model. Then, when the condition is met, the button will be automatically disabled.
That's really helpful. What about the virtual DOM in Vue.js? How does that work?
The virtual DOM is a key feature of Vue.js that helps to optimize performance. Essentially, the virtual DOM is a lightweight representation of the actual DOM. When changes are made to the data model, Vue.js updates the virtual DOM. That is a great use case for Vue.js, Jerry. Another benefit of using Vue.js is its ability to provide reactivity out of the box. When you update the data in your Vue.js component, the view automatically updates to reflect the changes. This can save you a lot of time and effort, as you don't have to manually manipulate the DOM to update the view.
That sounds really convenient. Can you explain more about how Vue.js achieves reactivity?
Sure, Jerry. Vue.js uses a technique called reactive data binding to achieve reactivity. When you create a new Vue.js instance, it creates a reactive data object. This data object is then passed to the Vue.js template, which is responsible for rendering the view. When you update the data object, Vue.js automatically detects the change and updates the view accordingly. This means that you don't have to manually update the view whenever the data changes. Vue.js takes care of it for you.
That's really cool. So, how does Vue.js handle reactivity for more complex components?
Vue.js provides a number of tools for handling reactivity in more complex components. One of these tools is computed properties. Computed properties are functions that are called whenever their dependent properties change. This makes it easy to perform complex calculations and manipulate data in real time. Vue.js also provides watchers, which allow you to perform custom actions whenever a specific property changes.
That sounds really powerful. How about custom events?
Vue.js allows you to create custom events that can be used to communicate between components. This is particularly useful when you have nested components that need to communicate with each other. When an event is triggered in a child component, it can be handled by the parent component, which can then update the data and re-render the view. This allows you to create complex UIs that are easy to manage and maintain.
That's amazing. So, what about routing?
Vue.js provides a built-in routing system that allows you to create single-page applications with multiple views. The Vue.js router works by defining routes for your application. Each route is associated with a specific Vue component, which is loaded when the route is navigated to. The Vue.js router also provides features like route parameters, nested routes, and route transitions, making it easy to create complex navigation structures in your application.
That's really useful. It seems like Vue.js provides a lot of powerful tools for building complex, reactive web applications. Thanks for explaining all of this to me, Joanna.
You're welcome, Jerry. Vue.js is definitely a powerful tool for building web applications, and I am glad I could help you understand it better.